all the hand planes that I use. Almost all of them are, I think all of them are from eBay.
Oh, really?
And a lot of them, like this is the most recent one I've bought. You can see it's in pretty bad shape. But this is probably the worst shape that I've bought one in. So that needs a lot of work. So I've grouped them up. This one's kind of by itself because it's what's known as a combination plane. And it comes with a whole bunch of different colors. And many more besides this. This is just the set that I got with this plane. And they're actually the wrong colors because for this type of plane, there's a little notch on the blade which fits into this little thing here. And that's what moves it up and down. Unfortunately, I didn't check that when I bought it. So with eBay, you can't really touch and feel stuff. So that's too bad. I have these two. They're plow planes used specifically for making grooves, for drawer sides, door frames, and such. These are rabbit planes. As you know, the name suggests, for rabbits. This one has a fence which can be moved, so it's known as a moving philoster plane. This one's a router plane, no power, hand router.
On that plane, I've always wondered. There's no straight edges on that thing. Basically, how do you put a dado across a piece of wood?
So what you do is, so I have an example here. You first mark them out, and then you make, if it's a through dado in this case, you saw down the sides.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then you do most of the work with the chisel, and then you use this just for the bottom.
Oh.
Because what it does is it gives you
a flat bottom on it.
It gives you a bottom that's co-planar with these surfaces. And since you can bring it down in really small increments, well, this is too much of a cut.
Too big of an increment.
Yeah. Well, so this is what you would do first. You
would base with a chisel and then clean up with the router plane.
Right. So you'd have almost always have a gauge line that you work down to.
Okay.
So you have that on both sides.
So that router plane is basically a cleanup plane.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. I always thought you used to make the whole dado with that at the end. That really sounds like work.
Yeah.
So in this case, I haven't gone down all the way to my gauge line yet, but you can go down in really fine increments, so you get a really nice smooth bottom. And then when you have true dados, you try not to go all the way because then you could break out, so then you come back the other way and just keep going down. So use the chisel as far as you can, either that way or you can thread on. And then use that. The other use for the router plane is, let's say you're making tenons, and in my case, I like to split my tenons. I'm not really good at sawing down, so you end up with pretty rough surfaces. So you can use the router plane to fix that. The trouble with that though is you only have one surface now, so you pivot on one side, and then you sort of turn down. So you keep your force on this side.
Wow.
And then you can just keep going down. And what you end up with is a surface like this. That's perfectly, if your sole is completely flat, a surface that's coplanar with the surface you're referencing off of. So those are the two uses that I have for this one.
Yes. You've used that a lot.
Yes. Yep. And pretty much all of these planes, although these are old, Veritas makes them brand new with some modifications. Lee Nielsen makes them. They're super expensive.
Julian, when you say modifications, you're talking about improvements.
Sure. In most cases.
In manufacturing and materials.
True. I mean, yeah, steels these days, and the castings and stuff like that, definitely improvements.
Metallurgy and milling.
True.
Yeah, the copper ones that look real good on your shelf.
Well, I mean, I've used every single one of these, except this one. This one was just an impulse buy. It's similar to this, but then these come on eBay very infrequently, and so I just, I said impulse buy. It's a plow plane as well, but just a small size for small pieces. So I have a small beading blade in this. Let me just show you how that works. And I'll come to these planes in the end. This is one of the first combination planes I bought, or one of the first joinery planes. But there's way too many settings in this that it's really hard to set up, especially with the wrong blades. Sorry?
You're an engineer.
I am, but yeah, so it takes a while to set things up because it has a double skate versus a single skate on those. But works pretty simple. There's a fence which you can move.
Excuse me, what's a skate?
This little thing there which rides along the base. Whereas this would be a sole where it's completely flat. This is a skate which goes inside grooves that you cut.
Oh, I see.
Oh, okay.
And then always start with really shallow cuts. Let me get there. And the trick with all these planes is trying to keep the plane from tipping on either side.
Firm rib.
And you always trying to push through rather than sort of push it down. And of course the type of wood also matters, but
Look how quick that happened.
that's what you end up with.
It took him a minute. And you can make some neat trim with those planes.
Gee.
And so there's different sizes that I have. And I said Stanley invented the 45
awesome.
when they designed the 45
That's
as an all-in-one plane. They have OG bits and a whole bunch of different sort of designs.
Pretty neat, isn't it?
You can make tongues with these, and then you can make the corresponding groove for tongue and groove. So yeah, there's just like I said, they sort of marketed it as an all-in-one plane, but like everything that's sort of a jack of all, it's a master of none. I really don't use that too much.
It gives you such satisfaction to see them all land on a shelf, right?
As I said, I use most of these. I think Alan's pulling out the blades for.
No, I took them home.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
Alan has a lot of the more complex ones.
So what did these cost you, if you don't mind me asking?
I think that one was close to $100 on eBay, which is not too bad because this one was like $80, this one was like $60, whereas the new ones are all $200-300. But again,
Can you buy a multiplane now? A new multiplane?
I don't
think so.
Maybe not. I don't think I've seen them.
With router bits and everything else, it's what everybody's doing nowadays. My experience with router bits making trim, unless you're making a lot of trim, you can make it just as fast with a hand plane as you can with a router bit.
Are you going to discuss these planes?
Yeah, definitely. Like I kind of went over. I was going to demo these one by one, but so this is a really simple plow plane. Again, same thing. It has a single skate which rides down into the groove. It has these fence rods which you can move the fence up and down. Just a blade and a little mechanism which moves it up and down. Again, very simple to use. If you've seen the big wardrobe that I was building the side frames, the grooves, a lot of them were done with this. So a lot of sharpening, a lot of passes, because you really can't take very heavy cuts, otherwise you get a lot of tear out, especially depending on the kind of wood you're using. So let me just...
That was red oak. You were making
that was red oak, yeah. So not the best kind for these kind of planes. Walnut works perfectly, as you can see that example. Again, let me just say that the main thing with these planes is when you sharpen your blade, the blade has to be absolutely square. Otherwise, the bottom of your groove, and as you go deeper in, it starts to bind. So that is really important, which I often struggle with because I sharpen freehand. So that's really important with these. But again, with these planes, you always start at the front and then work backwards. And this is white oak, so not the softest of woods.
White oak is, even though it has the porosity of red oak, it doesn't just tear like red oak does. White oak is a lot nicer to work with.
Wow.
Oh, and the one thing I failed to mention is these planes, they have a depth stop, which is basically a shoe which goes up and down. And the moment you reach your depth, it just stops cutting. So, But I generally like to measure mine as I go, because these things are kind of thin, so if you put too much pressure, they can kind of flex. But the idea is the shoe hits the side. Which it kind of has done there, so this stops cutting.
That's awesome.
So that's that.
I would have still been adjusting the router.
Well, these do take some amount of adjusting, but definitely fewer test pieces and things like that. And this plow plane works exactly the same. Same thing, fence, depth stop. Just a smaller one for smaller pieces, where this skate would be too long. So that's these. So moving on the moving finished grab that piece once here. Sorry, I have the same piece. So this, again, same, it has a sole versus a skate, a fence which you can move, a depth stop, has a little spur cutter in there, which is supposed to be good for cross grain. I haven't really used it on cross grain much, but great for making rabbits, a little adjustment to move the blade up and down to adjust to the thickness of cut.
Why would it be okay for cross grain or not? I can see with grain.
Well,
The spur is like when you use a chisel to cut a shoulder.
Yeah.
The spur is cutting your shoulder as you go.
Oh.
Right?
so I think if I was shorter piece, let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what
Alright. If I was to go cross grain,
yeah.
so you see how the shoulders, well, sort of neat. That's because the cutter's ahead.
Yeah.
The spur cutter's ahead of the blade. So it forms the shoulder before the blade comes in and cuts it in. Versus, I think if I was to take this guy, where there isn't.
Good example.
So you can see the tear out that's
yeah.
up there on the shoulder. So that's where the spur cutter really helps.
Interesting.
And one of my many tasks when working with hand tools. Just give me a second here.
Let's not put that on the website.
I know that.
Safety first.
It's called a knuckle buster. Mechanics know it well.
Yeah.
Well, it adds character to my wood. Red blotches everywhere.
I found a piece of wood in a scrap box and it looked like it had blood all over, but I wasn't sure.
But now you know, right?
Yeah, the secret's out.
Okay, we'll just edit that out of the video, I guess. So, the only difference between this plane and this plane, other than the fact that this is wood, it's older, this is metal, is that there's no fence on this plane. And I think how people use it is they make gauge lines on both sides, and you use your fingers as a fence. But what I do, since I have this plane, is generally I start with this, get my rabbit going, and then use this guy for a deeper cut, and then have the side of the plane reference against this little shoulder that I've made here.
That's great.
And and the other advantage of this plane is, say you make rabbits on the table saw, the router, whatever you. Let's say you're just off that little bit, and I've had this happen where I'll try and make that little adjustment, and I've gone too far. You can really get a lot done with just this in terms of cleanup, because you can go not just this way, but you could also go this way and change the width also if you wanted. So that's the advantage. It does take, again, the way you set this is, you pull it out, and then you tap it in, and then so it takes a little bit of setup, but it's a nice fun plane to have.
Is that a special chisel hammer?
I believe this is called a Warrington hammer, and it was designed specifically for these. Sort of, it hooks into this little section here.
So it really is.
But again, eBay, so yeah. So that's that. Oh, and there's different size cutters for the plow planes. These are the set that came with mine. I guess you could get different sizes. One of the downsides of using hand planes for grooves is you can really make them so deep. The wardrobe, for instance, the doors needed grooves that were 2 inches deep, and you can't do that with these. So I ended up using the table saw for that. So there's certain limitations.
Was that the mortise and tenon part of the door, you mean?
No, that was the door top rail had an arch, and then so rather than cut the arch and then make the groove on a shaped piece, you made a 2-inch wide groove and then you cut the arch out.
Yeah.
So that was that. So I guess we've pretty much covered all the joinery planes that I have.
Julian, you could have achieved the same thing by using a router bit, a wooden router bit, and given you the depth that you needed to be consistent all the way across.
After cutting the arch, you mean?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Well, as I said, I don't use too much of power tools, so I'm not too familiar with them. Most I use the table saw, the bandsaw, joiner, planer. Routers scare me. They just
That's healthy.
so. I mean, this way I get little cuts and bruises, but no major losses.
So he doesn't have to order 5 pieces.
Yeah, right.
So when someone says or uses the term hand plane, before I started with woodworking, this is what I thought of. These are your standard bench planes, as they're called. These are both number 4 Stanleys. This is a number 5C, and the C stands for a corrugated bottom. It's not a smooth bottom. So it reduces the surface that's in contact with the wood. So it's supposed to give you less friction as you drive it through. Number 4, smoothing plane. This is always on the bench with me. I use this, well, the intended use is to smoothen a surface, just to give you a finish ready surface. And what you can end up with, let me just, you can take thousands of them each off. Wrong plane.
Holy mackerel. Wow.
Show that shaving, Julian. Yeah. Grab that shaving down below.
And you know, if you just put it against the light, you can see the
Like
surface just glisten. So, and you can feel the difference. I mean, this was where I gouged in.
I wonder how well that surface would take stain. That's a pretty polished surface.
That's true. Since we, in terms of Western woodworkers, use sandpaper versus Eastern, you do have to go back with 220 and sort of roughen it up a little bit for your finish to sort of take hold. But it does just give you a nice silky smooth finish. The reason this happened, which is this little gouge here, is because I have this plane set up as a scrub plane, which has a huge curve on the blade.
Oh.
And what that helps you with is to take very deep cuts. And typically a scrub plane is the first plane that you use on your piece of wood. You use it to take or flatten it down or to bring it down in thickness. And that's why this helps. And you can take really thick shavings with this particular one. So this is what came out of the smoothing plane. Right, let's see what comes out of.
And what's the wood you were smoothing there?
You know, I don't know. Perhaps you can help me, but
That's alder.
I think it is some kind of softwood.
Alder?
Alder it is, yeah.
So I guess this is a maple. Let's see what the smoothing plane looks like on maple. That's not pretty nice for a hardwood.
I've read articles about plane blades, and some people advocate just taking the corner off of the plane blade, so that it doesn't have any propensity to dig into the wood. If your blade gets angled just a slight bit in a plane, it doesn't dig in.
So that's kind of what I have on
That's
this.
the rounded part he's talking about.
Yeah.
It's mostly flat. I've taken the edges off.
Yeah.
But that's mainly because if you're doing white surfaces, and you don't have the edges off, you end up with these tracks.
Yes.
So that's what that's for. But different people like to sharpen the blades differently. Some like some amount of curve, some like a lot of it, some like it perfectly square. What I will say though is, if you use a hand plane to joint edges, you have to have a perfectly straight blade. Otherwise, you'd end up with sort of a curved edge, and you wouldn't be able to join boards together.
Julian, while you have that taken apart, we'll pull the blade back out. Talk a little bit about the this piece right here.
Oh, okay. So
And how you set that up.
So this is what's known as a chip breaker. What it does is, as the shaving's coming out through the mouth, this little piece deflects it out and sort of keeps the blade area clean. For a smoothing plane, typically you want to have it as close to the blade as possible. As you can see here, I've got it as close as I can without, the piece sort of sticking out. So that's what that's for.
And it's also a matter of that those two surfaces are coming together and have to be very tight.
True.
So it's not just a matter of sharpening the cutting edge of the plane, that those two faces where they come together have to be very tight. Otherwise you end up with stuff basically getting
Yes.
caught in there.
And in fact, the new planes you get from Lee Nielsen, they don't have this hump. They're totally flat, so they actually sit flush with the blade the entire length.
So they support the blade, in essence. That's what they're doing.
True.
And the reason you want what Andrews is talking about is a nice flat, you're supporting the whole blade all the way across. You don't have that blade supported, it's going to chatter.
Well, you see,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of the older blades didn't have chip breakers, but they still work. And I might as well mention this. I follow the classes online from a person called Paul Sellers, who's a British woodworker, and he has this thing with how people talk about plane chatter, and that's why if you look at the newer planes these days, the iron's a lot thicker. They say a thicker iron reduces chatter, but all of these have the original irons. In the planes he uses, the original irons, thin, none of the new improvements, and they work just fine. And his philosophy is if you have a good sharp blade and a properly set plane, you should have no chatter. And of course you need one of these, which is basically a rag soaked in 3-in-1 oil, and what you do is you just rub it in, and it will just glide along the wood surface, and it makes. And if you guys want to just try planing after this, it's perfectly fine. You can see it takes no pressure at all to push through. And he has this video where he'll put a plane on an edge. He just pull it with a little wire, no downward pressure, no nothing, and you just full length shaving all the way through. So,
but that is a whole nother skill set. In order to tune your plane like that, that's a different skill set.
well, he doesn't.
As opposed to just mechanically making the parts for a cabinet. That's a whole nother level of skill.
Well, using hand planes and hand tools in itself takes a certain amount of practice. I definitely haven't mastered everything yet, but I can set a plane pretty well that I can take pretty thin shavings and get a pretty good surface. I wanted to show you the scrub plane, right? So, just for comparison with the shaving from a smoothing plane. So this is how thick a shaving you can get with a curved blade. And so when you need to bring down wood in thickness like I had to when the planer was down, scrub plane works wonderful. And once you're done, you end up with this horrible torn up, chewed out surface. And what do you do then? You just take your smoothing plane, put against the plane there.
Yeah, turn it around.
Swipe. Got to a nice smooth finish. So that was that.
I read an article about joining two pieces of wood side by side, and they say to take both pieces of wood if you're going to do it with plane, and just take them, book match them, just lay them back together like this. Then when you plane it across the top, if there's a variation in the way your plane lays, it won't matter because when you push them back up, you'll have the opposite on each side, and it will still join.
True.
But if you do one board and then do another board, you have propensity of, having your plane angle a little bit one side or the other, and it's just not going to work right.
Yeah, and especially with me, since I'm still learning, I have a tendency to tip a little bit,
Right.
either one way or the other.
Sure.
So you do end up with something that's not perfectly.
Well, 3/4 of an inch isn't a very wide surface to have to be honed down on.
So that was that. But the thing with number 4 is besides just smoothing a surface, there's so much more that you can do with it. For instance, if I wanted to put a round over, I can do a rounder pretty quick with just a number 4. Same if you wanted to do a little more. you want a nice chamfered corner. I mean, mine's a little crooked, but you can do that. Again, just number 4. And I think Paul Sellers has this thing where he does even raised paneling using the same number 4. Let me see. Again, I haven't really mastered these things yet, so my lines aren't perfect. My miters aren't perfectly 45, but I'm going to attempt to do that here. So you get the idea. You just keep going, and you get a raised panel.
Nice.
Wow. So yeah, that's about it. And of course, the 5C again, it's a longer plane, longer sole. So if you have a whiteboard and a lot of undulations in there, use a plane with a longer sole, so it takes up the high spots, and you get a flat surface. That's why you would use a plane with a longer sole. Or if you have a board, and as you said, you're trying to joint it, if it's long, and you want something with a long sole, so you don't end up with a dip.
I have one at home that's actually a wooden version, but it's about that long.
Yeah, we have
door.
number 6 in the shop.
Okay, a door.
Which is-
a door. Typically, what I used them for was for like doors, when you want to have a nice long straight shot.
That's work.
Yeah.
It's a workout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one I have is even longer than that.
So this is a 5, this is a 6. And this is what they call a joiner plane. And you can see it's kind of considerably longer
And it's wider blade.
and a wider blade.
And that actually comes into a long time ago. Back in the 1800s, they made those out of wood.
Well, pretty much all these planes, you can find wood versions of them online. But again, if the bigger they get, the more expensive they are to ship. So you end up paying more for, or close to the price of the tool itself for shipping. So
Wooden planes these days are for collectors.
Yeah.
Rarely is it for use.
well, I use that wooden plane for all the rabbits.
I know you
in the
do.
back.
Yeah. Like I said, you're the rare breed.
The smaller ones you might be get by with, but the one that's this long,
Yeah.
you have to be 21 and muscle bound to be able to use one of those on a piece of wood.
It's also got a 3-inch blade in it.
Yeah, right. It moves a lot of wood.
Yeah, but as I said, if you have your blade sharpened, and it doesn't take a lot to sharpen. My sharpening system is right here, always on the bench. I have 3 stones and a strop that I use. It's not that tough to plane through. If you have a dull blade, you're trying to force yourself. But if you have a sharp blade, just not very difficult. So.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Julian.
Yeah, thank you, Julian.
Yeah, if you want to buy it, feel free.